Aloha, welcome back to Aina Bear Farm. So this is the first in a series of videos looking at our farm divided up into the permaculture zones 1 through 5. I mentioned this in a previous video where we were doing a full tour of the farm that I was going to look at each zone in a little bit more detail for those of you that might not want to sit through an hour-long video looking at all the details, but maybe could divide that up into some shorter ones if you're interested in what else is going on here. So just really quick, if you're not all that familiar with the zoning in permaculture, it's pretty simple. It's basically the idea that your house is kind of ground zero because that's where you emanate from. It's where it's kind of always your starting point. And then your zones go out in concentric circles from 1 through 5, which is a kind of a good intuitive way to divide up your farm into areas connected to how often you go to those areas, how much work they need, so that the types of things that you're doing in those areas. And today we're going to start with just looking at zone 1, and then we'll have a zone 2 video, zone 3 video, and then we'll combine zones 4 and 5. Zone 1 is the area immediately around your house. It would include things that you spend a lot of time in, like your garden, which is right behind me, and I'll show you that in more detail in just a moment, as well as a nursery, any kind of operations that require day-to-day hands-on involvement, stuff that you really need constant access to. So it makes sense that it would be as close to your house as possible. So let's have a look here. First, I'm going to show you an overall map of the property so you can get a little bit better idea of where we are here and what exactly I'm talking about. So here you can see an aerial photo of our property taken by my friend Jay with his drone. It's a little bit of an older photo, so it doesn't show all of the updates, but I think it's still a good representation of how we divide up the property into permaculture zones. So this being the first video and series of videos talking about the zones, we're just concentrating on zone 1, which is circled here in blue. In future videos, I will show how the other zones concentrically move out and away from the house. But this zone includes our garden, our composting operations, some fruit trees, our nursery, shed. We have a row of mango and banana trees that just happen to be right behind the house, but it's also kind of a well-landscaped garden area. So all the things that need to be tended to on a regular basis that we need quick and easy access to are located right here in Zone 1, and we'll be showing those in this video. All right, so we'll start the tour here in our kitchen garden, which I've done a lot of videos just focused on this area. This is about a 70 by 50 foot garden space, so decent size. And the goal here was to start a garden from scratch. This was all just lawn grass when we moved in 5 years ago, and develop it without using a lot of outside add-ins, like buying compost and other, fertilizers or anything of that nature. So we've really tried to grow on the property a lot of what we're using here and nourish the soil that way. It's been a really slow process. If there's anything I would go back and do differently, it'd be a lot more heavy cover cropping and management that way, because I've had a lot of kind of cleaning up, and then things get completely overgrown and out of my control, and then I have to go through and sort of start all over. And it's been a lot of kind of one step forward, two steps back kind of deal. But in this last year, I feel like I've really turned a corner. I've stayed on top of it better. I'm really starting to see some positive turnaround in the soil health and the plant health. And so let's just look at what we've got going on in here. Down at the very bottom, I do still have a lot of what would be considered cover crop. There's a lot of sun hemp in there, the crotalaria. It's a really good nitrogen fixer. There's cranberry hibiscus just kind of reseeding itself. There's some pigeon pea in there. And I pretty much just let this part of the garden kind of do its thing for now. I may shift that in the future. Just beyond the fence there, we've got the red tea leaf, which is just a nice barrier plant. I do need to prune some of those back. They've gotten kind of tall and spindly. It's a nice, just regularly available plant. It can help you hold up your fence, in our case, you know, against the dog. And then the tithonia in front of that is our main windbreak, which even though there's a nice stiff trade wind blowing today, you can see it's pretty still in the garden. Absolutely necessary in our area. Down here is a section where I recently chipped a bunch of the tithonia. So I threw down cardboard, wood chips. I put in a few native plants, including like this a'ali'i. This is a really nice native shrub. It's very drought tolerant, has really nice, pretty small flowers. I tried to do some sugar baby watermelon, and I've never really seen watermelon grow like this. It shot up, seemed like it was doing really well, immediately started making fruit, which in retrospect I guess I should have cut off. And then it just kind of died out. I mean, that's basically, it's looked like that for a few weeks now, so not really doing a whole lot. May try again, because, you know, this is what we got a long growing season. This is just a native hibiscus. You can tell something really enjoys chomping on that. And then we've got ulei. Hiding in here somewhere is another native plant that makes a really nice flower. There it is. And there's even some olena or turmeric planted in there, and some kalo or taro. Plumeria down here in the corner. Looking forward to having some nice Plumeria flowers, and those, from what we've seen here, attract a lot of ladybugs, so that's really nice. This is a bed of olena or turmeric with pigeon pea. So this end of the garden is kind of designated more long-term or perennial vegetables. You can see cassava on this next row, mixed with bele spinach. We've just put these in, so they're not, you know, super happy yet, but they're getting established. They're on their way. This area is an area where I'm going to do some Sesbania trees. Like this is a seedling here, and that is going to eventually be like this larger canopy up here. This garden gets full sun all day, which can be brutal in the summer, and so that canopy of Sesbania with its kind of thin, spindly leaf cover has been ideal for providing just enough shade for our garden vegetables. We do have a row of white pineapples that we're kind of phasing out, so it's not the most well kept. And then that next row up is right now a mixture of pigeon pea and asparagus, which we're still kind of getting established. We just did not nourish it enough in the early years to be getting a good crop off of it yet, but you can just see those there, but it's getting there. We're kind of recuperating now. Back down on the annual vegetable side, got a couple rows of okra. This is one of our favorite veggies. I'm originally from North Carolina and grew up eating okra in all things, all ways, fried and stews and gumbo and all that stuff. So one of my faves. We've just now been starting to harvest a ton of this. Next to that is ping tung eggplant. This is a pretty good, reliable crop for us here. It's just starting to flower, looking real happy. You can see the perennial peanut here in the middle of the bed, for those of you that recognize this plant. It's a nitrogen-fixing ground cover with these nice, beautiful yellow flowers. Technically, flowers are edible, but here we have a dangerous disease that's transmitted by slugs and snails and all their like goo. So you don't really want to eat stuff like this raw that, you know, is just sitting on the ground and definitely has had contact with those, because that could transmit the rat lungworm disease and make you really, really sick. So I don't recommend eating those, but anything that you cook is fine. We're finishing off our carrots from the winter and the spring. So we had a couple rows of these, got about a half row left. You can see the more perennial peanut. This was a row of carrots. Now this one we came in, and it's kind of a good idea, or a good representation of our succession. We put down homemade compost. So this was compost that we made in our own compost pit, which is a combination, I'll show this later, but of grass clippings, rabbit manure, food scraps, things of that nature. And then we pile up grass clippings on top of that. And then here you may recognize there's a whole other batch of okra coming up, so that we can succession. And when these guys are kind of stop getting to the point where they're not producing anymore, we'll have these guys coming in. You can see like the pigeon pea here and there, just a really good crop. I mean, eventually kind of gets in your way and you got to cut it down. The callo or taro has not done great here, which I think is a lot due to the shape of this garden, in that it's set up with raised beds. These are all kind of divot paths with raised beds like this. And that is a really water-hungry plant that I think would actually prefer the opposite. Probably do great if I was growing it in the paths. But that's okay. We've got a whole callo section on the farm in zone 2 I can show in that video, where these will be transplanted from. These are very special varieties that we've that have been gifted to us, that we're trying to basically nurse them enough to move them to that other location. So the perennial peanut, we let it just kind of go up underneath these Sesbania, which again, here for shade, also nitrogen fixing. And then as we make our way up, there's actually a row here of some ginger, which is like these little guys coming up. There's a little bit of turmeric or alena. And, you know, it's pretty happy underneath this little denser shade right next to the trees. Here we've got cherry tomatoes. I can't remember the name of this variety, but I got it from the Hawaii Seed Growing Network. And so it's one of the cherry tomatoes that are kind of championed here in Hawaii. Seem to do really well. I've grown them before, and definitely pretty easy to grow. And these are being grown with a little bit of homemade compost, the wood chips, and then we fertilize that with liquid weed water that we make, which I can also talk about later. This was a row of yellow summer squash. It's something we are trying out. Really not doing so great so far. This is the only plant that really has done anything, and it's not even doing so great. So not sure if we'll try that again, but really just looking for some kind of summer squash, sort of like zucchini replacement, because you definitely can't do zucchini here, but something you can eat like that. I know loofah, if you pick them early, might work. So if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments section. These are the old Brooks slicing tomatoes. And these are also from the Hawaii Seed Growing Network. Seem to be really happy. We've lost a few of our early fruit to the end rot on the bottom of the fruit itself, but that's been pretty consistent and typical everywhere I've grown tomatoes. And I just pick the first few off, chuck them, and then after that, once their roots really get established, they seem to do fine. So not something I really worry too much about. In the back, this is the sorrel or roselle that grows the red flowers with the calyx kind of outer shell that we pick and use to make a delicious tea. And those are usually ripe around November. So that's pretty much what we've got going on in the garden. That back area there is a little bit wild, needs some tending to. We've got a few papayas in here. They haven't really done very much, but they're not like selective papayas or anything, just kind of from kitchen scraps. That's the garden. Let's show the rest of zone 1. So this is the top of our property right behind the kitchen garden. It's a little bit more of a zone 2 type of setup, but you know, it is right there behind the house. It's kind of a blended function area. It's interesting. The main idea here is Namwa bananas with different varieties of mango in between them. We've got 4 or 5 varieties of mango out here, and it's just banana, mango, just all the way down the entire top of the property out here. You can see like we've worked in some of the cherry tomatoes, also doing the weave method here to hold those up. Looking good so far. And then this row, these are jack beans, so a little bit of a syntropic technique here in terms of like succession, bring these in, but right now I actually need more jack bean seeds, so I haven't come in and pruned those down. We do have some cassava back there and some pigeon pea out here. We did have an early succession of pigeon pea also, took it down. We've got the big Guinea grass in the back that's, always plentiful for chop and drop, mulch. Got a little bit of calla or taro up here. This is all on irrigation, so it's nice to be able to put plants like that in and know that they're going to get water without me having to stand there with a hose. Plenty of banana racks out here, which is really nice. Now in this area we get right behind the house, and this is where we get into a little bit more of a blend between agroforestry and landscape design, or maybe like an edible landscape, because all the windows of the back of the house look back here, and so we want it to look good in addition to feeding us and having some practical value. So we've got the sweet potato ground cover here, the bananas, and this is an issue and sort of why I brought up the whole practical versus aesthetic thing. Occasionally one of these namwas will just completely go over. Because this is on a hillside like this, the ones that are leaning this way, they're going to tend to fall. And so you're sort of left with the decision, like what's going to win out here, practical or aesthetic? Because this doesn't look great when you've got this nice uniform row of all these bananas, and then you got one that's just collapsing under the weight of the banana rack. But for me, I almost always go with practical. It's a big, nice rack of bananas. I want to eat those, and so it stays. And I just tolerate looking at a little bit of goofiness for a while. But we mix in the coleus and that purple cassava. I've got some agapanthus flowers back there, some different tea leaf, some olena or turmeric. So, just a lot of different textures and colors and different things going on. Always trying to like fill in all these spaces, crowd out the weeds. Here's another variety of cassava with kind of a cool leaf shape. So, this might give you some ideas of how you can blend practical and aesthetic to some degree, where it looks good, but you're also getting a lot to eat out of it. Right behind the house, of course, our shed. We do have some rain catchment. We have 3 rabbits. They're really kept as pets. We don't eat rabbit meat, and we feed them a pretty consistent diet of Timothy hay, and then veggies and the tops to plants and weeds and things like that we find on the farm. And so they're cute, and they make really high quality manure that gets added to the compost. So they've got this really nice little outdoor area. It's nice and shady, a little run where they can dig in the dirt there, but it's fenced in on the bottom so they can't completely dig their way out. So as we move a little bit further out, but still in zone 1, got some various composting operations. So we're moving really kind of more into zone 2. I mean, this is technically out in the food forest, but still very close by. And we've got some different piles of compost. There's wood chips. It's mixed with biochar and urine. This is just kind of a standard compost mixed with all the things I talked about before, with the grass clippings and the rabbit manure and food scraps. So we've always got something, you know, stewing over here, making more nutrients for the garden. Do make biochar. So that's from the last time we made biochar. Keep other composting supplies down here. This is where we keep a bin of biochar going. So this one is cooking, be ready to put on in a few weeks. And this is just the weed water. And so when I am doing like heavy weeding on the property, I will just throw it in that barrel, fill it up with water, leave it for a few months, stir it a couple times, then take out the debris, leave the juice, dilute that, and use that as a really nice fertilizer. Occasionally I'll get, you know, very intentional about what I put in there, and comfrey, you know, and that kind of stuff to make some super powered fertilizer, but usually it's just, you know, random weed juice. It's a good way to put those weeds back to work. And then as you kind of make our way all the way around, you've got, again, you know, just little landscaped areas. You can see like little rocks around some of these nice, that's Okinawan spinach. That is a nice edible ground cover. Hapu'u fern, some other native stuff, sword fern. It's a nice ohia tree. This is kind of getting into our nursery, which is not in the best shape, but here you can see this nice big monstera that's got some fruit on it. That fruit takes forever to ripen, but it's getting there. I've never tried it, so I'm looking forward to that. You can see you got a bunch of little mangosteen seedlings in the dense shade over here, some lolu, native palms. And then there's mountain apple, guava. It's always nice to have some good fruit right up next to the house in your zone 1. I've got this planting table, a few things here and there, but looking kind of sad right now. And part of that is just because, you know, with the wind coming from this direction, from the ocean, it's pretty brutal on young plants. And so I really need to kind of up my nursery game and protect them better. Shade cloth, some you know, serious windbreak. So yeah, that's sometime in the future back in that area. We'll get that going. And then this will be like some of the last things I'll show is like we've had some of these areas, like this is a decent slope where there's just junk weeds and Guinea grass. You can see we've replaced that with all perennial peanut, and it's really happy. Got a lily koi or passion vine, passion fruit growing on the fence there. And so the idea is to just keep running this down all these places where there's that really hard to maintain, ugly, scraggly grass and weeds. It's just all going over to perennial peanut. And the next section down you can see it's tarped. So once that dies, we'll let that spread. We do have a few other fruit trees out here. This is a bay tree, so you get the bay leaf for cooking, and pomegranate, and a couple fig trees down there. And then these are the older fruit trees that we inherited from the previous owner. There's a bunch of different types of citrus, a couple of giant avocado trees, and then a lychee tree. And then we put in this koa right here on the corner. So that's kind of all the different things going on in zone 1. And let me flip this around and we will end this video. All right, so I hope you found that interesting and helpful. Let me know in the comment section if you have questions or you know, any tips or anything you'd like me to do, like a deeper dive video on to talk about more. And look out for the next video where we'll be talking about zone 2, which is going into our food forest, our kind of heavily managed area of the food forest, And that's going to be a cool one. I think a lot of you will be really interested in that. And we appreciate you watching as always. Aloha from Ina Bear Farm.